Freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome. You are listening to What on Earth is Happening. This show will discuss the topics of human consciousness, mind control, natural law, the occult, and all issues that affect the freedom of the people of Earth. What on Earth is Happening will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Passio.
Welcome, one and all. You're watching What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Ladies and gentlemen, government is slavery. And here on What on Earth is Happening, we are ending slavery one mind at a time. Thank you for tuning in today. We have a great show lined up for you. Today is Sunday, March 13th, 2022. This is episode number 246 of What on Earth is Happening. Please note that What on Earth is Happening is a cumulative information broadcast. That means that if you are a new viewer to the show, you should not watch from here. You should go back to show number 1, and you should watch in order without skipping around at your own pace. The later episodes of What on Earth is Happening are built upon prerequisite knowledge and material that is covered in earlier episodes. So please do not skip around and listen and watch the podcast in order. That is how you will gain maximum value from the concepts that are being discussed during the broadcast. So today on the show, we are going to be revisiting the topic of fake-ass anarchists. Now, we haven't really covered that topic on the What on Earth is Happening podcast. I did do a a presentation of that topic for the Seed 4 conference last year. But I feel it's such important information that it really needs to be covered here on What on Earth is Happening and gone into in depth. So today's show is entitled Fake Ass Anarchists Revisited, in which we are going to be not only breaking down the types of those who I would consider, and anyone who truly considers themselves to be a real and genuine anarchist should consider to be a fake anarchist. We're going to be talking about the kinds of fake anarchists out there. We're more than that going to be discussing their mindset and how they are incorrect in their assessment of the world. Their worldview is completely screwed up. And the ideologies that lead to that type of a screwed up worldview. And we're going to be talking about why the powers that be in our world want there to be so many sects of fake anarchists in our world, because they want the genuine article looked at with disdain and contempt by the average member of the public. They don't want people to understand what anarchy really is and the positive aspect of it. They want people to think about it in the terms of these fake anarchists who make the genuine article just look terrible. And that is why all of the forms of fake anarchy that are persistent in our world are one huge psyop. So you could look at this presentation that I'm going to deliver here today as a primer in Psyops, or psychological warfare, probably before the end of this season of What on Earth is Happening, I'm going to be giving more shows on Psyops, or psychological warfare operations that have been conducted in humanity, and who conducts these programs and why. And, we'll be talking about a lot of cultural Marxist psyops. We'll be talking about the painting of the founding fathers of America as evil slave owners. We'll be talking about the Flat Earth movement. We'll be getting into depicting Hitler and the Third Reich as good guys. All massive, massive psyops that are ongoing, not just have been done in the past, but are ongoing. Then we can look at more flagrantly obvious psyops, such as the 9/11 mass murder event, mass ritual, and we could look at, obviously, the coronavirus scamdemic. Another, thing that I really have to bring up just before we go into the main presentation for today and housekeeping announcements is we are entering in the next few days what is known as the occult season of sacrifice. And I usually have some slides on this. I'll have one or two next week. But I just want to give a warning out there to everyone that March 19th unofficially begins the season of sacrifice, and March 22nd begins this season in earnest. And what it is it is an occult time period of approximately 40 days, 43 days if you count the 3-day prelude to the opening of the season. There's like a 3-day opening or prelude starting from March 19th, then going to March 20th and 21st. And then the 40-day period officially begins on March 22nd and proceeds to May 1st. This is, we are at the midpoint of it's the opening of the spring season to the midpoint of the spring season. So the season of sacrifice takes place right around the spring equinox, sometimes a couple of days after it, and it proceeds to the midpoint of spring, or it's one of the major occult Sabbats of the year, known as Beltane. Beltane, of course, literally means Bel's wheel. Of course, the god of the occult is Baal, Bill, Bel, the bull, all different names for it, given different cultural contexts, but still the same phonetic variation of the B and the L consonants filled in by a vowel of their choosing in the middle. I've covered this in my presentation called Satanism and the Dark Occult, Demystifying the Occult Part 2. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's a good one to watch as a prelude to understanding the season of sacrifice. But we're going to be entering this officially next weekend and proceeding into early next week. I'm going to say that the day to watch is March 22nd, which is also a Tuesday. We're in a season of war right now. Obviously, that's the next major event that they want to constantly put out fear-inspiring events out there to people to keep them in that vibration of fear. So really keep an eye on Tuesday, March 22nd, which will be coming up after our next show next Sunday. So Saturday is the 19th, and I will be releasing my Fear of Sacrifice presentation at the unofficial opening of the season of sacrifice to kind of combat that energy and talk about what we have to do as people who are aware of the dark occult and their methodologies to put out positive information and energy into the world to combat their world machinations that are ongoing and their psychological warfare events that are constantly ongoing to inspire fear in our world. So, with that being said, I'm going to, I just wanted to let everybody know we're getting ready to enter that. Next week, I'll have a few slides on it as a refresher. And, of course, watch the dates March 19th and, of course, March 22nd for sure. So, let's jump over to my slides for housekeeping announcements. And let me make sure that everything's working here. Okay. All right. So, as I said earlier, this is show number 246, and the title is Fake Ass Anarchists Revisited. Thank you to Will Keller for the great artwork for the show today. As you see there, depicted is an anarchist with a mask, but he's not who he claims to be. He's not who he says he is. He's a fake. He's someone else behind the mask with ill intentions. But he'll put the mask on pretending to be the anarchist when he's really nothing of the sort in his mind and in his heart and in his soul. So we'll be getting into this topic shortly. A few housekeeping announcements. Of course, we are on a new streamlined show format for this season of What on Earth is Happening. Possibly into next season, we'll see how things go in my life arrangements. But we're on a 6-month on, 6-month off schedule from January through June. Each Sunday, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. Today we had the end of daylight savings, or I should say maybe this is the beginning of daylight savings. I always forget which way it goes because I don't pay much attention to it. But clocks went ahead 1 hour here in the United States. So hopefully people noted that change and are not going to be showing up late for the broadcast today. The One Great Work Network is running pretty strong. We are onboarding new content creators actively. I think we now have 55 great content creators. More content creators have been onboarded, and I'm just waiting for them to post their first content after they get the hang of our system on the website and the back end. So once that is done, we will have more content creators avatars on the site so that you can check out their blogs and even donate to them and help them out with their work. Very happy with how the network is going as far as content is concerned. I think we need to bring more viewership onto the platform, of course. But as far as content goes, I couldn't be happier about how the network is proceeding. I think we have some of the best content creators in the world. Check out One Great Work Network at our website, onegreatworknetwork.com. The How to Become the True Media Seminar is going to be taking place July through December. 6-month course on technology and how to become the new media, how to become the true media. So this will be hosted on the Telegram platform. We are looking at all the different aspects of Telegram. It looks like it's going to be a great way to host this, and I expect it to go pretty smoothly. It'll be taking place every Monday evening from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, from Monday, July 11th, 2022, up through Monday, December 12th, 2022, for a total of 23 class sessions. I'll be teaching just about every technological aspect of what people need to know to do this type of work. So when people say, well, I don't know how to do what you know how to do, Mark, well, there's no excuse. This is a very affordable seminar for the skill sets that are being taught and for the length of the seminar. And once you take this, you will have the skill sets under your belt to do the types of things that I do here at What on Earth is Happening. There is limited seminar space available. It will not be an indefinite amount of people. I will be capping that at the number that I have chosen for the seminar to make sure it is not too unwieldy and it becomes too impersonal. So don't wait till the last minute to enroll. Enrollment will be opening Friday, April 1st, 2022. I'm ironing out all the enrollment details. Those will be posted on the website and on gifts.whatonearthishappening.com, which is where I take electronic enrollments. Again, the new component of this is I will be accepting old school mail-in enrollments. So I just want to let people know I will be accepting donation by check, personal check, or money order for enrollment in How to Become the True Media seminar this year. That will be capped by July 1st. So if you're going to enroll by check or money order, I must receive your check or money order by July 1st, 2022. I'm just announcing that in advance so people know that. You will have from April 1st through July 1st to get that check or money order to me for enrollment in this year's seminar. For all the skill sets that are going to be taught and more information, and you could also enter the link, click the link for enrollment when we put it on the site on April 1st. Please visit our website, howtobecomthetruemedia.com. Once again, howtobecomthetruemedia.com, coming at you July through December of 2022. The What on Earth is Happening IPFS project is actively underway. This is to put all of my content on the IPFS platform, which is a distributed protocol for storing information and retrieving information in a way that makes it completely uncensorable. It is known as the permanent web, part of Web 3.0, as it has been called. You would need a internet connection in your home of a minimum of 200 megabits per second in the upload or upstream direction. If you do not have that, please don't even inquire as to the IPFS project and its other requirements. I just let people know upfront in advance you need a minimum of a 200 megabit or greater connection in the upstream direction. If you have that, you can go to whatonearthishappening.com/IPFS and fill in the form there. After you fill out that form, you will get a PDF document that you can download that has all of the other preliminary prerequisites, requirements for taking part in this project. It does require a dedicated mini computer. That is how I'm handling the project, because when other people run all other software and they run software that they want to run or use it for what they want, it becomes very unwieldy. And I'm trying to do this technologically correct. So we're going to use semi-powerful machines, but that are going to be dedicated solely to this project on your own home local area network. We can get into all the tech details if you want to take part in the project. And if you do, just visit that website there, whatonearthishappening.com/IPFS for more details. I was interviewed by Vinny Eastwood on the Vinny Eastwood Show with special guest David Icke. So it was a dual interview and it went really great. I was very, very happy with the interview. David is a great guy. Got a chance to speak with him a little bit before the show went live and a little bit after as well. Thank you to both Vinny and David for a great interview. That is live on Odyssey. It's live on What on Earth is Happening. It's live on the Vinny Eastwood Show. And you could also check that interview out at whatonearthishappening.com/news, which is where I put all my recent interviews and happenings that are going on in the What on Earth is Happening world. So do check that out. I think the interview was great. I would love to talk to David Icke sometime, on perhaps What on Earth is Happening for an interview, maybe toward the end of this season or maybe next season. We'll see what happens. Usually we host call-ins to the show. I don't think we're going to get to calls this week, but if we do, the link is whatonearthishappening.com/Discord, or if you're already listening on the or watching on the whatonearthishappening.com/show page, you can click on the little widget there on the page that says connect, and that'll connect you into our call-in room. Again, I don't believe we'll have time this week. This topic is definitely going to go into at least 2 weeks. So I'll probably deliver half of the presentation this week and half next week. We'll see how that goes. Honestly, like any other presentation that I deliver live here, it will take as long as it needs to take for me to adequately feel that I've gotten the information across conceptually. So, we'll see how that goes. Future upcoming shows on What on Earth is Happening, as I said, I'll probably cover some Psyops operations. I'm definitely going to be doing a show on the occult and the occult tradition specifically that I'm going to be choosing is going to be Thelema. Look for that in at least 2 or 3 weeks. We'll see how the slide making and how my organization of that presentation goes. Definitely not next week, but more likely than not the week after that or 2 weeks after that. We'll see. But that will be one of the next topics for What on Earth is Happening, is the occult tradition of Thelema and how it is completely confused with Crowleyism, which they are certainly not one and the same, and we'll be making that clear distinction here on What on Earth is Happening and clearly explaining what Thelema really is as a positive occult tradition. So that'll be coming up on future episodes of What on Earth is Happening this season. Again, today I'll be breaking down Fake-Ass Anarchists, a presentation that I originally delivered as part of the Seed 4 conference back on May 15th of 2021. So that's coming up in just a couple of moments. I'll give these for now so that I don't have to give them at the end of the show and interrupt the flow of the presentation. The ARC 2.0 is, of course, available and has been for quite a while. It is a 2 terabyte storage drive of your choice, whether you send me a regular 2 terabyte bus-powered hard drive, USB 3 bus-powered hard drive, or a solid-state USB 3 bus-powered drive. The ARC contains all of the research data that led me to understand what's really going on in our world and much more than that. It comprises approximately 26,000 audio files, 9,500 books, and 3,400 video files. If you're interested in that offer, please visit whatonearthishappening.com/ARC. And you could fill out the form and get the PDF document that has the shipping instructions. The shipping instructions are stringent. Please pay close attention to them. Do not modify them in any way because they're there to primarily protect your own property that you're sending to me, and it's going to be filled with data and sent back to you. So take them seriously and don't flout the instructions. Just follow them for the betterment of the whole process. That's what I ask respectfully if you're going to take me up on the ARC offer. And when you do follow them well, there's no problems. Your drive will probably get to me very safely if you pack it properly, and you'll get the data with no problem. And I usually get these back very quickly to people. I don't let them linger. As soon as I get them, I open them up, I copy the data, I pack them back up, and I take them or have them taken to the local shipping office for reshipment back to you. So I take the offer very seriously, and I just ask that you do as well, out of respect for myself and my work. So if you do want to take me up on that offer of all of that knowledge, please visit whatonearthishappening.com/ARC. If you want any hard copies of any of the material that I've presented here on What on Earth is Happening in the past, you can get DVDs, flash drives, the complete Mark Passio One Great Work collection with all of my material throughout the years, and much more, including t-shirts, stickers, coasters, etc. That is at my gifts site. That is a subdomain within my main website at gifts.whatonearthishappening.com. Many ways of donating on gifts, including Cash App, GPay, Wise, a new international option that I started accepting for gifts a couple of weeks back, as well as 5 different cryptocurrencies: Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Ethereum, and Dash. We may be adding new cryptocurrencies soon. I'm looking into that. I may be adding possibly Monero, possibly Solana, possibly Cardano, maybe others. I'm going to look at the feasibility of adding all of that. We'll see where that goes, but those are some of the ones I'm looking at. So check out gifts in the future for new cryptos being accepted for both gifts and donations. Maybe even Theta, which is a Fuel's alternative video, uncensorable video platform. So we'll see about adding possibly all of those cryptocurrencies in the future. So if you do want to support What on Earth is Happening efforts, and we definitely need the support because obviously resources have been tight, and there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes here that have made it difficult to operate. Please support us at gifts.whatonearthishappening.com. Also, if you want to make a straight donation, not for a gift item, but just to support our cause here, you can go to whatonearthishappening.com/gifts. And you could donate in all the ways that I just mentioned for gifts, as well as a technology donation. The technology donation will send you to our wish list for technological items that we require to continue to operate this operation here. And if you're so inclined, you can purchase that technological donation and have it sent directly to us here at my home in South Philadelphia, the headquarters for What on Earth is Happening. So those are the ways that you could donate to the What on Earth is Happening cause. Thank you to everyone who has donated in the past. From the bottom of my heart, you have kept this operation going, and we really sincerely appreciate that. So those are all the announcements, the housekeeping announcements that I have. Let's go ahead and jump over to the main slides. Give me a moment to do that. And for the slides today, I am going to put this in full screen mode because it's a different aspect ratio than what is here in my interface. I may eventually make a new interface that's geared toward the 16:9 aspect ratio. I do not have that right now prepared, so I'm simply going to enter into full screen mode for the slides today. So this is probably the last you'll be seeing an image of me for today, unless I decide to go full screen myself. So let's jump into the slides for today. And this presentation, again, is entitled Fake-Ass Anarchists. Originally delivered May 15th, 2001 at the Seed 4 conference. This is Fake-Ass Anarchists Revisited, as I will be extending some of the concepts and unpacking them to an even deeper extent, because I think that this is so critically important to understand this information in particular. And I think many of the people in the anarchist or freedom movement in general don't understand these ideas. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made a presentation about them if I thought that they were well understood and common sense knowledge. So let's jump in, and I'm going to jump in with my usual caveats. I'm leaving them intact, even though obviously most people listening, watching are, not most of them aren't going to be new viewers to the show. But I think it's still important to unpack these ideas with these caveats in mind. You will not be seeing or hearing anything quote-unquote brand new here today. These ideas have been with us since the dawn of time, okay? They have different names on them, right? You could call it anything you want, but it's generally the same basic mind control and brainwashing methodologies that have been used against humanity since humanity has existed as a species, period. So there's an ancient saying, there is nothing new under the sun. And a lot of people don't understand this, or they expect all this new stuff that they've never heard of, that they've never heard before. Well, if you want me to just make things up, I can make up plenty of new stuff, right? We can talk about the blue avians coming to visit, right? And their spacecraft are just outside Earth orbit, and they're going to be here any day. They're just getting their act together. We could do that whole psyop, and that'll be brand new. And some people will never have heard about it. We can give you the savior psyop if you want something new. We can invent the new savior if you want something new. But if you want actual wisdom, if you want actual knowledge and understanding, there's nothing new. There's no new component to this. These are the same tactics of control that have been going on since time immemorial here on this planet. And unfortunately, the people of Earth haven't caught on. So the occultists, the social engineers, the mind controllers of our world don't have to modify their techniques, folks. They don't need to modify. Why would they have to? If it's always worked and it's still continuing to work, why modify the technique? The technique is sound, right? The technique is the same as it has always been, and it has always worked upon the gullible humans on this planet. So they don't need to modify it. There's nothing new under the sun in their techniques. You could say Corona hit people, blindsided them, but not really. I looked at that as, and of course they were going to use something like that to put people in fear. No surprises there. Same techniques that they've always used, right? So the idea that there is nothing new under the sun means that these things have always been around us. And specifically, the truth has always been around us. The truth is objective. The truth is eternal. The truth has always been here for us to discover and to understand. It will always be here. The truth isn't going anywhere. What is true is going to remain true. It doesn't change. Okay? So that's what nothing new under the sun means. So if you're expecting me to present all this new stuff here, you're going to be sorely disappointed. It's the same things, but we have yet to come to an accurate and full understanding of them because we are ignorant and we are completely hard-headed. We are stubborn. We don't want to learn. We don't want to accept that this is the way things are. We want to see our little aspect of things as being correct and right, even if it is wrong. That's what the ego is. The ego is that which doesn't want us to see that which is wrong, that we have wrong. So all I can do when it comes to what is true, what is real, what has been going on since time immemorial, what currently is going on, and what's going to continue to be going on if we don't wise up, is I can present it in a personalized context, in a personalized aesthetic, in a personalized framework, right? I can give it to you the way that my perceptions have seen it thus far. And I could put slides together in a way that I feel conceptually organizes it and conveys it. That's the only thing that'll be relatively new here, not the general concepts and ideas. So keep that in mind moving forward, because I still get people, I still see online, even this late in this whole endeavor, to this day, I still people saying things in boards and in comments sections like, there's no new material here. Passio's talking about things that we already know and understand. Well, that's great if you know and understand it. Smartass. Most people don't. And the idea isn't for you to keep taking in more and more and more new stuff that you've never heard of before. It's for you to master the material that you know so that you're able to teach it to other people. Most of these jackasses saying this, the Passio's not presenting anything new here. Ike's not presenting anything new here. Eastwood's not presenting anything new here. Jones isn't presenting anything new here. This is what they sound like. Smacked asses who aren't doing a damn thing themselves. How about instead of saying nobody's presenting anything new because, hey, jackass, there isn't anything new. It's all stuff that people just have to get a firm handle on and then stop being manipulated by it. How about if you teach that to other people and then you'll be teaching something not new, right? No, because what a smacked ass like that does is says to themselves, all I'm worried about is me. I'm only worried about myself. That's why they're a Satanist deep down inside in their heart and in their mind, because they only give a shit about themselves. And what they say is, I want more and more and more that I've never heard of before. I'm not interested in teaching anybody else. Fuck those people as long as I know. And they never become teachers of the information. They just sit back and complain, I already know this. I already know this. No shit, Sherlock. We understand you already know it. The goal is to teach it to other people. And you're not doing that. You're leaving that to a small handful of people to do that. And that's why the world continues to go deeper and deeper into bondage and slavery. because most people won't open up their lazy loser mouths and speak the truth to other people. And then other people want to say, you shouldn't get upset and mad about people like that, Mark. No, just accept their ignorance and get comfortable with it. How about go fuck yourself? How about the whole problem with the world is that most people aren't angry at the ignorance levels and aren't angry at the jackasses out there who want to complain about how somebody else does something instead of doing it themselves and helping the actual effort. How about that? How about we try that for once? Now, because there's a million excuses and a million fears to prevent people from doing that. That's why coming up soon I'll be delivering Fear of Sacrifice Revisit or Fear of Sacrifice Extended. So let's continue. If you're easily offended, obviously you should not bother with this, because if you're, some snowflake imbecile that can't take what the truth is or wants to complain about how I deliver things, then get the fuck out now. Not interested in you being here. You don't need to watch this. You don't need to listen to me. Go watch a football game or something or basketball game or whatever the hell's on right now. Not interested. I'm here for the tough people who have thick skin and who are tough and who aren't little wimpy pieces of shit. Okay? So I'm just going to say it out in the open like that. This is my show. That's how I want to say it. I'll go easy on people on other shows because out of respect for them, I won't get as nuts as I'll get here. But guess what? This work isn't for babies. If you're a fucking baby, leave. If you're stupid, leave. If you know you're dumb, if you know you're stupid, if you know you can't understand things well, this isn't for you. Go back to number 1 and listen to the Mark Passio wearing the mask. Because I was a fake ass nice guy back then. Okay? And it's sickening to me when I go back and listen now. It's all true. Everything I said was exactly the truth. No, none of that is different. How I delivered it makes me want to puke. Because I was this guy back then. Right? This was the Mark Passio who existed back then, whether anybody knew it or not. And I wore the mask to try to get people to be nice, to stay and hear me out. I don't give a fuck whether you want to stay anymore. That's your funeral. That has no skin off of my back because I know that I'm doing what I need to be doing spiritually. I know that I am fulfilling my charge. And guess what? My charge is not to be nice to people. My charge is not to sugarcoat things so that they'll listen. That's not what my charge is. My charge by creation is to deliver the information out in the open, forthright, without sugarcoating it, without putting any kind of a coating on it that makes it something that it isn't. So this information and all of my work isn't for the babies of humanity, the easily offended, or in other words, those who don't want to hear the hard truth spoken in the method that I speak it, in a completely unforgiving and unapologetic way. I feel you're doing a disservice to humanity by doing something like that. If you're putting on a mask and you're trying to be nice and sweet just to get people to listen, you're doing a disservice. People have to know how fucked up they are. People have to know how lazy and stupid they have been up till this point. That doesn't mean they can't change. They're ignorant. They're lazy. They're apathetic. They're cowardly. These are the destroyers of freedom. If we don't tell people this out in the open, they're going to continue to remain that way. Being super nice to people does not necessarily get people to change. I'm sorry. I do not accept or believe that. And if I tried to just do that and told people that's just the way to do it, I'm not saying berate them to the point where you beat them down so mercilessly that they feel like they want to stay in shame. You have to be hard enough on them to give them the information plain and simply and say, no, you're wrong about what you've formerly believed. It doesn't matter whether you want to believe that you're right about it. You're wrong. You've done wrong things. That doesn't make you a good person. It makes you a bad person. You're capable of changing, but you're going to have to do a whole lot of self-work upon yourself to really change. That's what the message here is, folks, even when it comes to people who say they agree with me. Because just saying you agree with me doesn't mean you really understand and are doing this work. I'm sorry, it doesn't. And this goes to all of the people who claim to be anarchists, all of the people who have followed my work. You're not spared from this either. Many of you are the problem. Many of you are the problem. Many of you are incorrect in your assessment of what anarchy truly really is. Many of you have skewed views. Many of you have skewed worldviews. Many of you are still ignorant in many, many areas. Many of you aren't doing the work, the shadow work, or the great work of influencing others. And I have to come out and say that. If you were doing it, the world would be changing for the better. Is it? Is the world changing for the better or the worse? You have to openly assess that honestly and say the truth about it. Stop looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Stop looking at your own behavior through rose-colored glasses. You have to make an honest assessment of both the world and yourself. So if this describes you, somebody that gets easily offended by hearing something that's in conflict with your existing mindset or worldview, then you shouldn't bother with this work right now. You should come back to it when you've matured to a state of mind that resembles psychological adulthood, and that comes about through doing shadow work upon yourself. Then this work might have some positive impact upon you. But the mindset of the easily offended, if that describes who you are right now, you're probably wasting your time watching this. So you are free to leave. I don't need to modify my approach. You're free not to pay attention to this. Once again, that's also your fucking funeral, but go ahead and ignore it. You're already in a state of ignorance if this describes you. If this doesn't describe you, no need to take offense by it. I'm not describing you. I'm talking about the other people who are like this. So these are the two basic caveats I give before going into deep psychological work such as this. Because that's what this is, folks. If you think this is just going to be about political action and political sects, you're wrong. This presentation is about deep occult psychology. The psychological factors that are contributing to people buying into all of the psyops that is the fake forms of anarchy. The psyops that are the fake forms of anarchy, people buying into that because they're psychologically screwed up. They've been victims of dark occult psychology. To understand those methodologies, to get out of that mindset, we have to understand those methodologies, and that's what we'll be describing here today. I disclose such hardcore caveats before beginning my presentations, knowing even in advance that this might turn people away from even listening what I have to say, to what I have to say. So be it. See, that's how you know I'm the genuine article, and that's how you know other people are fake-ass punk bitches. I'm the genuine article because I don't care whether I have one viewer. You could all shut it off. It'll still be true. The end. You see? I'm not interested in who I offend in viewership and click-through rates and shit like that. I'm here to say the hardcore truth to people, whether they're ready to accept it or not. If they're ready to accept it, then let's go. And you'll get it. If you're not ready to accept it, you're not going to be willing to listen, so be that as well. Then you can come back to it when you've gotten your head screwed on straight. And the material will still be here because I archive it in uncensorable ways. So, I am not trying to inform the soft and wishy-washy, those who want to be spoken to as if they're little babies. I have more respect for my listening audience. You could say I developed more respect for my viewing audience over the years because in the early days, I felt that you were too babyish to even hear the real personality of Mark Passio, quite frankly. So I didn't allow that to come through in the early days of this broadcast. I feel like I expanded my worldview to say, I have to be who I am. And I have to let other people be who they are. Insofar as, are they going to be willing to listen to what I have to say? So I'm going to show you my real personality. I'm a sometimes outright nasty and even can be mean South Philly dude. And I'm not interested in really changing that. There's no problem with me from the perspective of what I know and what I'm communicating. Can I be ultra abrasive? Yes, I can. But guess what? I'm still saying what is true. So if you don't like that, you don't need to be around me. If you don't like that, you don't hang out with me. If you don't like that, don't don't watch my material. So, all of my work is spoken to people who are ready to hear the truth. If that doesn't describe you, the work isn't for you. Who will accept it because they've applied reason and critical thinking skills to arrive at correct conclusions. But they are also those who have not yet simply not discovered this information until this point. So I put the truth out to them this way as a fulfillment of my moral obligation to speak that truth in the tyrannical times in which we live. That's my moral obligation, and I'm fulfilling it, and I'm not sugarcoating it, and I'm not being nice about people who are remaining in willful ignorance. If you just haven't come across this information, that's one thing. That's not the case for most people. Most people have come across this information and they willfully reject it out of hand. And that makes them my enemy. That makes them my enemy. Because by remaining willfully in that state of ignorance, they keep the state of slavery going in humanity. Slavery is driven by the continued ignorance of human beings. So let's establish some basic working definitions going forward for this whole presentation. The first one is the definition of anarchy. What do I mean when I say the word? And other people will say this word and mean completely different things, have a completely different internal definition in their own mind. Regardless of what anybody who is watching, what the definition that you have in your own internal mental, constructural worldview and mindset happens to be, you need to remove that definition. You need to work only with the definition of the word as I am using it here in this presentation. Because if you work with your internalized definition instead of the one that I am using for the word, you're not going to understand anything I mean. And you're going to insist that the word means what you currently think it means instead of the definition that I am setting up, which is the actual correct definition. See, here's the problem, folks. Most people of the world have been given a false definition of the word anarchy. And then that false definition has been repeated endlessly by the media, the lying whore media. Okay? So what you need to do is you need to reevaluate the entire definition of the word anarchy and get down to the true etymological definition of the word. The English word anarchy is derived from the Greek prefix a or an, depending on what it is put in front of. And there it is written in Greek characters in parentheses there. And that word, that prefix a or an, means without, the absence of. And then the second part of the word is derived from the Greek noun archos, archon, written there in Greek characters, alpha, rho, xi, omicron, nu. So alpha, rho, xi, omicron, nu, which means ruler or master. The word archon. Okay. So when we put these two Greek words together, the prefix an onto the Greek noun archon, we get the word anarchy. Anarchos, anarchon. Anarchy does not mean without rules. The word archon does not mean rules. It means those who claim to be the ruler or the master of another. The word archon is in the cultural context of being a slave owner or a king or ruler over other subjects or slaves. So when we put those two Greek words together, the word anarchy literally means without rulers, the absence of rulers, the absence of masters, without masters, no rulers, no masters. So if you did a little word experiment, a little word association game with people on the street, you're free to do this. You could do this anywhere in your whole, little town or city. Go out onto a corner in a heavily foot trafficked vicinity of your town and just have a piece of paper with the words "no rulers, no masters" on it. Okay? No rulers, no masters. And ask people what they think that means. Give one word to describe the condition: no rulers, no masters. And most people are going to, in a word association game, tell you that the phrase for them, no rulers, no masters, equates to freedom. Freedom will be the number one term you will get. The heavily, heavily, heavily brainwashed may actually say that state is the equivalent of chaos. And believe it or not, a few people who I've done this word association game have actually said that means to them chaos. And that's how you know they're deep in psychological mind control and spiritual death. Because obviously not being owned by someone, not having a master over you that claims to be your owner, that says, you're my slave and I'm your master. I'm your king and you're my subject. I'm your ruler and I own you. Not having that means you're free. Having that lording over you, having that mastership over you, that kingship over you, means that you're a slave. To me, nothing could be clearer. Nothing could be more true. How could you possibly claim to be free if you have a master? And we're talking about having a ruler and a master in the 3D, folks. Religious imbeciles out there who want to say, God's my ruler, God's my master. Let me tell you something. The God of creation doesn't want to rule or master anybody. It wants freedom. It doesn't want to be a ruler or a master. It created the laws of the universe to actively put into effect the optimum conditions for human evolutionary development and the maximizing of freedom, not the taking away of it. If you think God is that kind of a ruler or a master, I feel sorry for your little puny brain of what you think the God of creation actually is. For the wonder that it has put into effect and all the order it has put into effect in creation. And you want to look at it as a ruler or a master. I would never refer to the God of creation as my ruler, my master. It wants my optimum benefit and freedom. And if you don't see it like that, there's something really fucked up in your mindset. And that's how a lot of ultra-religious people insist on seeing it, like, I'm a slave to God. God doesn't want slaves. If you have a God who wants slaves, fuck your God. How about that? Let's just say it right out in the open. If your God is the God of Romans 13, that says, obey all the worldly authorities, I put them into authority over you. Fuck your God. Shove your God up your own ass. How about that? You know, you're an imbecile and so is your God. You're worshiping the Anunnaki. You're worshiping lizard gods. And you think you're worshiping the God of creation, you fucking fool. You're a low-life fucking fool who never got it. If you think God wants to rule and God wants to be a master. The God of creation sets the physical laws into effect and it sets the spiritual laws into effect at the creation of the universe. And they run like a computer program. They're not going to be breakable. They work the same way all the time. They're perfect. They're unflawed. And they're not there to enslave us. They're there for our optimum evolutionary benefit and advancement. And if you don't still know that, you're a little fucking child deep down inside. I'm not going to sugarcoat it to you. I think religious people are part of the fucking problem. And we're going to talk about them. I think atheists are a gigantic part of the problem, and we're going to talk about them. If you're either a super religious person who views God like that, or you're an atheist who has no spirituality and doesn't even consider the spiritual, I think you're both fucking imbeciles. And I mean radical fucking imbeciles. So let's set out to offend everybody, because that's what most people in this imbecilic world fall into the categories of. Are you imbecile number 1 or are you imbecile number 2? Both completely fucking brainwashed by the occult social engineers to fall into a dialectic so that anarchy never truly manifests. And those two groups are some of the two biggest fucking idiots making sure we stay enslaved. And they're so dumb they don't know it. And I'm not going to be here to tell you whisper sweet nothings into your ear just so you listen because you're one of these fucking morons. I'm not interested. I'm here to say how it really is. And you need to fucking accept it and learn it because it's the truth. It's not my matter of opinion. It's what's true. And other people need to teach that to people unapologetically because it's true. The real world, my real world definition of anarchy. Anarchy is a state of existence in which individuals are not ruled or enslaved by others, meaning other human beings, other beings in the 3D world, and are free to exercise their natural rights unrestrained by violence, duress, or coercion. Unrestrained by violence, duress, or coercion. Coercion, the application of force to make someone else's behavior comply with your will. Duress, threatening direct physical harm and the initiation of harm upon others through threat. So you keep them in a state of continuous threat of bodily harm. And violence, the initiation of direct physical harm upon another, or the taking away of freedoms that one doesn't have the right to take because the person was exercising their rights and not harming anyone else. This is violence. All government is based in violence, duress, and coercion. All of it. All rulership has always been based in violence and coercion. Kingship has always been based in violence, duress, and coercion. There has never been a moral condition of kingship, rulership, or government. The old world, authority was vested in the king or the queen, the single sovereign, who claimed to be the authority and claimed that they were the authority. It was vested in them, and other people were their subjects or their slaves. And it was vested in one human being. And then the violence was done by the king's henchmen, the king's knights and vassals and other servants, and his foot soldiers, conducting violence, duress, and coercion upon the subjects that the king claims to have authority over. In the modern day, government is the same idea. It's just vested in a little bit more people than one. It's invested in an oligarchical few. All governments are oligarchies, meaning ruled by the few, ruled by a ruling class, a very, small minority that comprises a ruling class in society. Government is just the same idea of kingship, rulership. It's just vested in more people, allegedly. The claim of authority is vested in more people. So this state of rulership and coercion is always immoral. The state of rulership, kingship, government. It's violence, duress, and coercion, and it's always immoral. The state of anarchy, on the other hand, is the absence of that violence, duress, and coercion, as being vested in people who have the right to do it, the authority to do it. The state of anarchy can only be created and maintained via behavioral alignment to objective morality through a deep understanding of natural law, spiritual law, moral law. Morality creates freedom. As more people are moral, more people are free. If we don't understand how natural law works and objective morality works, we can never become free. And this is part of the problem with the fake-ass anarchists. They insist that there can be moral relativism. They insist that natural law doesn't exist. They insist that the creator of the universe doesn't exist. They insist that they can create a condition of anarchy without the understanding of natural law, without the understanding of objective morality. And I'm here to tell you that is impossible and it cannot be done. It never will be done. It never has been done. Part of the problem is so many people are in these poisoned worldviews and then at the same time claiming to be an anarchist, that they are, through their behaviors, through their mindset, which informs their behaviors, they are actually creating the exact opposite of what they say they want. And that is because they're phonies, they're fakes, they're not the genuine article. They don't even understand what anarchy is and means. And they claim that they do because they've been given the Psyop version of anarchy. One of the many Psyops versions of anarchy. And that's what this whole presentation is. It's exposing a Psyop. The rulers of the world don't want anarchy to break out. That means that's the end of their rulership. That's the end of their easy way of life. That's the end of their parasitic fucking way of life, feeding on other people and them doing nothing, just claiming to be an authority and taking what other people rightfully created and earned through violence and duress and coercion. The breaking out of the actual state of real anarchy means that's the end of business for them. That's the end of their way of life. They can't be a fucking parasite anymore. They can't be a low-life parasite. They'd have to actually go out and really produce themselves something worthwhile that society actually does want. And they don't want to do that. They just want to be a low-life fucking parasite, living off of the product of labor of others. That's what all rulers have always been. That's what all kings have always been. That's what all forms of authority have always been. That's what government is and always has been. Low-life, fucking immoral parasites living off the product of the labor of other people, which is slavery. That's all slavery ever has been. Why do you think they want to enslave people? They want to enslave them to feed off of their labor so that their lazy ass doesn't do any labor and they're just taking what isn't rightfully theirs to take. Slavery is theft, just like every other form of wrongdoing. Violence, duress, and coercion are theft. Violence is the taking of bodily well-being. Duress is the taking of one's right to live unaccosted by the threat of violence. Coercion is the taking of someone else's free will and freedom of choice when they're not harming others in that choice. And authority claims to have the right to do this and claims that people have the moral obligation to obey that authority. Could you believe this mental disease is still to this day it's the most prominent religion on earth, maybe other than money. Other than the belief that money carries any inherent value. That's the biggest religion on earth. Second biggest religion on earth is authority. The belief that other people have the right to make claims of you must do what I say. Your will must be brought into conformity with my will, or I'll do violence to you or send people to do violence to you. And imagine the jackasses in this mud race called human beings actually believe that people have the right to do this. The people who believe in it are even bigger fucking scumbags than the people fucking taking part in it. Because they're the ones who contribute to the validation of this violence. They actually make other people believe that it is morally justifiable that it is morally legitimate. Could you imagine anybody being a bigger fucking lowlife piece of trash than a believer in authority? Yeah, other people are authorities. They're your slave owners. They have the right to boss you around. They have the right to tell you what you can and can't do. Get the fuck out of my fucking face, losers. You're a bunch of fucking lowlife loser babies. And you're immoral trash because you believe in this, because you believe that violence, duress, and coercion are perfectly morally acceptable, justifiable, and legitimate. And that makes you a piece of fucking dirt as a human being. And nobody will just say it to somebody like that to this day. I'm one of the only people in the world just coming right out and saying that. People who believe in authority, you're lowlife fucking dirt. You're dirt. You're immoral trash. You believe violence, duress, and coercion are perfectly morally justifiable because that's all kingship has ever been. That's all rulership has ever been. That's all government has ever been, you piece of lowlife immoral dirt. Nobody wants to say that to them like that, but that's exactly what the fuck they are. Only morality can create true freedom in our world. You got to stop believing that authority is somehow legitimate morally, because it's not. Belief in authority makes you an immoral person. It makes you a bad person. Just believing in it, because your belief will inform your behavior, and your behavior will then support people who are conducting violence, duress, and coercion. And they're immoral pieces of dirt, and so are you for supporting them. Throughout the presentation, I'll obviously be referring to natural law. Natural law is not a constructural idea or a belief. Let's get that out of the way first and foremost. It's not a religion. It's not an idea that exists only in the minds of human beings, and it's not a belief. Then people will also say, why is there a king representing natural law as justice? And you have to understand, there can be no king in the place of natural law. You can't pretend to be the ruler over others. Natural law is the ruling dynamic. It's not a ruler per se. It's a force in creation that is a set of rules that ultimately does rule us, but not like a king ruling over subjects through violence. It will continue to allow us to make mistakes to the point where we enslave ourselves. It won't interject in it. It simply is the dynamic that brings us the consequences based on the behaviors and the thoughts, emotions, and actions that we are putting out into creation ourselves. So you could look at it as a mirror, and that's actually a perfect way to put natural law. So after I describe natural law through this slide, I want to talk about the king image again and go a little bit deeper into this concept, because I don't think people understand this tarot card, why I've chosen it for natural law, why it sits at the top of the macrocosmic tree of life when you lay out the tarot cards according to the Kabbalistic tree layout. And they don't understand the king symbolism. So I want to get a little deeper into that as part of this slide. So let's give the working definition for natural law. Natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. Now, of course, every time I give this definition, it must be broken down into its constituent elements, because people often don't even understand what half of these words mean. That's sadly how deep in ignorance humanity is. Universal means it doesn't matter where you go in the universe, these laws apply. Every single corner of creation, every single atom in the universe, every place in the universe, every time in the universe, natural law is active and applicable and is applying. It is inherent. That means it is not something that is a constructural idea. It is not something that is a mental construct. It exists inherently in nature. It is a set of universal forces that exist in the manifest physical universe and are operating in the universe. Gravity is operating on this planet. It's not a constructural idea. When you let something go, it falls to the center of mass of the planet. That's not an idea. That's a factual, observable form of dynamics, of mechanics. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks of that. It's still operating. That's what we mean by universal and inherent. Inherent means it is part of the fabric of nature. It's not an idea that exists in the mind. If ever anybody never even conceptually thought of the concept of gravity, it would still exist as a force here. Magnetism, it's a natural force that exists in the universe. If we had no conceptual understanding of it, it's meaningless. It does not matter. It still exists inherently. That's what inherent means. Objective. It's not based on relativism. It's not based on perception. It's not based on what we think of it. Perception has nothing to do with it. It exists objectively in nature. Whether our perception is aligned to it is a different story or not. But it is not a constructural idea that is dependent on what we think of it. What you think of it has no bearing on natural law. Once again, you could disbelieve in gravity, and you could go up to a tall building and walk all over the edge, off the roof. You're still going to die when you hit the ground, whether you believe in gravity or not. For all the flat earthers who don't believe in gravity as a force in nature, that's great. Go leap off of a cliff and see what happens to your body. It's not going to matter whether you believe in it or not. Or what you want to call it or not. The observable effects are still going to take place, and you're still governed by that force, regardless of what you think of it or what you think it is. The result is what you're still going to get. You're bound by the force, and you're going to have to operate within its confines as boundary conditions. If you ignore that law that's in effect, you're going to have negative repercussions, negative consequences. It's non-man-made. Once again, this isn't a construct that exists in the human mind. It's not something that man gets to make up. Natural law has nothing to do with any of the laws of man, including common law. This is the universe's laws. I want to stress this over and over again because there are still people that don't understand it. There are still people that go, that's just common law. No, it's not. It's not the same thing. It's not an interpretation of nature's law, which is what common law is. It's actually nature's laws. I don't know how I could get this across any clearer. It is the actual laws of the universe, not of man. They're not written anywhere. Okay? They're not required to be written down. No one needs to write down the laws of gravity or electromagnetism in nature. They still operate, whether they're written down, understood, or not. They're not constructural ideas. Neither is natural law. It's not a constructural idea. It's eternal. That means it doesn't matter whether you go back to the beginning of the universe or go all the way to the end of the universe. Whether the universe is steady state or whether it's contracting and expanding, also meaningless. As long as anything exists, natural law exists. It is an eternal, immutable set of laws. Immutable means these laws never change. They're not open to interpretation. They're not open to, human perception of them. They simply exist and they never change. Nothing that humanity or any other 3D being or force can do can alter these laws. They will always exist and they will always be the same. And again, they are conditions. They are things that will create circumstances depending on the input. They are the things that crunch the input and generate the output. That's what the natural laws of creation are. They say, what was the input? of this scenario or circumstance? Well, here's the output. Oh, the input is different now? Well, then we generate a different output. It's natural law is a transformer. It is a processor. It takes in the input of behavior. It outputs the manifestation of consequence. It takes in the input of behavior. It outputs the manifestations of consequence. And that's all life is. Life is choice of behavior and consequence for behavior. That's it. That's all it is. And what we're in right now is ultra terrible, degraded, harmful, manifested result. Manifested consequences for the aggregate behavior that mankind has put into the great processor / transformer called the natural laws of creation. And we're getting the justice that the universe is going to create for us. We're always getting justice. We're getting exactly what we deserve at all times and places. That's how natural law works. It governs the consequences of the behaviors of beings who have the capacity for understanding right from wrong, the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. So natural law does not apply to beings lower than in consciousness than humanity. It applies to humanity and up. Animals are not governed by this kind of natural law. Of course, they're governed by all of the other physical laws of the universe, but when it comes to these spiritual laws of consequence, you don't apply these to the animal kingdom. You apply them to the human kingdom and higher levels of consciousness. Why? Very, very simple. You don't need to make this any more complicated than it is. Everybody goes, how could that be? How could, if it's universal, it applies to human beings and not animals? Yes, it does. That is how it works. Because an animal can't sit there and explain to another person why one behavior is wrong and one behavior is right. Animals don't have that cognition capability. No matter how much you want to believe that your dog is going to deeply know the difference between right and wrong, these are instinct response behavioral mechanisms that might make you believe that. But the dog will never be able to sit down and have a conversation about why is this kind of behavior an immoral one because it initiates harm to another sentient being. The words will never leave that dog's mouth. It cannot be expressed by that dog's physiology, their brain, their central nervous system, and then come out in the form of speech. That's why we are a different classification of animal in the manifest natural universe. And that is why natural law holds us to a higher standard and account when it comes to the laws of morality. And this should not be hard to understand. This should not be the biggest contention when it comes to, I think natural law doesn't apply because why wouldn't it apply to animals? This is such a fucking dumb, stupid argument. I've explained it a million times. A person without a burnt fucking brain can understand the answer. See, but part of it is atheists want to argue the point and want to say, this would just apply to everyone. No, it wouldn't, because there's intelligence under the hood of nature. There's intelligence under everything that lies in the physical universe. And that intelligence does make, you could call it striations, or you could call it levels, okay? That certain beings who are at a lower level of consciousness and complexification in their whole ability to understand what is going on around them and within them are not going to be held to a higher moral standard or even an equal moral standard than a being with a brain like ours and with speech capabilities as we have. Quite frankly, we should understand it based on our capacity, all the tools that we've been given. And when we don't, and we remain ignorant of it, then we're going to be held to moral account. we're going to be held to moral culpability for that ignorance. Please understand this first sentence in its entirety when it comes to natural law, because this is so important when it comes to making the delineation and the distinction between genuine forms of anarchy and fake ones. The understanding of natural law is centered upon bringing our own conscience, our knowledge of the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior, into alignment with objective morality. This means definitively knowing which behaviors are rights because they do not initiate harm to other sentient beings, and which behaviors are wrong because they do initiate harm to other sentient beings. Then people will insist, well, isn't the term harm subjective? No, it's not. We all know what harm is. Damage to our body, damage to our property, taking away our rights, making physical threats and putting people under duress, taking away people's freedom of choice when they're not harming others. All of these are forms of harm, and we all know that they shouldn't be done by ourselves to others. And then we want to advocate that other people are allowed to do them. This isn't that hard, folks. It's not that hard, and we have to understand it. When human beings in the aggregate, meaning collectively, live in harmony with natural law, meaning we are living morally, we are choosing moral behaviors over immoral behaviors. We are choosing a moral way of life over an immoral way of life, namely kingship and government, rulership, slavery. So when we're aggregately living in harmony with natural law, and therefore we are moral beings in the aggregate, we become and remain free. This is called the law of freedom. When human beings collectively live in opposition to natural law, and therefore they become immoral people, bad people, they become and remain enslaved. That's why we're enslaved. The bulk of humanity are bad people. The bulk of humanity are immoral because of what they advocate for and what they do and what they continue to allow. This is true, and it cannot be any other way. Everybody goes, how could you say most people are bad, Mark? Most people don't want the world to be the way that it is. Wrong. Most people are bad. Most people do want the world to be the way that it is. Most people say they want the world to be differently. But through their actual thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, they keep the world exactly the way it is. So deep down inside their psyche, in the subconscious mind, they want it to be like that. Otherwise, they would change it through their thoughts and behaviors. And they don't want to do that because that's sacrifice. That's what they fear more than anything else. I refer to this dynamic of when you're moral as a group, you become more free as a collective, as a society. And when you're immoral, you become more enslaved. I refer to that dynamic of natural law as the law of freedom. Freedom has a governing equation. Freedom has a governing dynamic as well. As aggregate morality increases in a population, freedom increases in that population. As aggregate morality decreases in a population, freedom declines. And slavery takes over. And I said I was going. Let me go back a slide. I said I was going to talk about the tarot card. So people will say, why is there a king? If kingship is immoral and rulership is immoral, why is there a king on the justice card representing natural law, which if you lay out the major arcana on the two trees of life, the microcosmic tree of life of the Kabbalah and then the macrocosmic tree of life, the justice card representing natural law comes out to the Keter position or the crown chakra on the tree of life, the highest position, because it's the governing dynamic of creation, natural law. Natural law is the king of creation. It's not the king of humanity. It's not the ruler of a set of slaves. It's not the master over slaves or the ruler over subjects. It is simply the dynamic in nature that is the governing dynamic. Hence, it is depicted as a king holding the sword of truth and the scales of actual justice. because that's what it metes out. It metes out justice through truth. When we are behaving in a way that is true, we are behaving in a way that is moral. When we are behaving in according to false beliefs, then our behavior comes out immoral and generates slavery. That's why right means correct and morally right, morally upstanding. And wrong means incorrect and immoral. There's no accident that to be morally in the right is the same as being correct. And to be morally outside of the boundaries of our rights to conduct immoral harm is to be wrong, factually. There's a reason that works out that way. You need truth to have justice. You need truth to be right and to have justice. That's why the sword is representative of the knowledge. That's conscience, the knowledge. See, the sword is the sword's deck of the tarot is intellect. Our ability to cut through logical inconsistencies and come to the place of truth, of knowledge and understanding. And then, of course, the scales have traditionally represented balance and justice. But there's another reason that the king is on the card. The king in the ancient world was known as the sovereign. The word sovereign comes from two Latin roots. Super, which means above or beyond or outside the boundaries of, and then regnum, coming from rex, regis, meaning king. Regnum is rulership, okay? So, kingdom, rulership, etc. So, super regnum, or sovereign, again, the V and B is exchanged in classical Latin. There is no B. It would be substituted by the letter V. So, super regnum, sovereign, right, means above rulership, not a subject or a slave. The same as anarchy means no master, no ruler. Sovereign means you're not under the rulership of a king. You're not under you're not the property of a master. You're beyond that as a sovereign. A sovereign was the king because no one was above him in rulership in the 3D concept of actual authority through kingship. The concept here is we are all made in the image and likeness of God because all of us are sovereign. And none can tread on the sovereignty of any other because they're all at the same level. This is what it means to be born equal under natural law. Equality under natural law means we are all the sovereigns in the world. People say, what form of government do you want to see? I want to see anarchy, and simultaneously, I want to see anarchy worldwide, which simultaneously means 7.5 billion sovereignties, 7.5 billion kingships and queenships, meaning no one is a subject, no one is a master or a slave. Everyone is at the same level of sovereignty because they're a reflection of the God of creation. See, puts a whole new paint job on being made in the image and likeness of the Creator, doesn't it? You know, but dumb people still can't see that. Dumb religious people who need dumb religion still can't understand this. That should blow people's minds away. It should blow the top of your head off when you understand and equate these ideas and how powerful the symbolism of the tarot is. You should be humbled by it. You should get the chills up and down your fucking spine. Okay? And then religious people, want to totally denigrate this because they don't understand it because they're just fucking dumb, son. Religious people, you're just fucking dumb. That's all it really comes down to. It's a shame that you need such dumb belief systems because you're such dumb people. I'm going to go in as hard on religious fucking idiots as I am on atheist fucking idiots because you're both fucking idiots. All right? And you're going to hear it from me. I'm going to put out some wonderful, great teachings, and then I'm going to be fucking scathing with people that deserve being scathing with. Because you do. You just do. You've had enough time to get your head out from up your ass, dunce. You've been given more than enough time and more than enough information, and you're just a fucking low-life scumbag who wants to stay attached to wrongness. That's all you are. People like that don't really deserve a lot of respect. You're fucked up. You're just fucked up. And you don't want to admit it to yourself or anyone else. Get your head out from up your ass and learn the truth. You'll be a better person for it. Because right now you're fucking yourself up and you're fucking everybody else up with you. And that's the problem. You don't really have a right to remain in this level of ignorance that you're in. You just believe that you do. Like I said, it's your fucking funeral if you want to stay attached to the body of a fucking dead corpse. Because that's what you are. You're a fucking dunce eating the flesh of a dead corpse, which is your belief system and which is all the fucking bullshit institutions of this world, including religion. The crux of the entire matter when it comes to anarchy is the difference between actual right and wrong. True anarchy can only manifest in our society when whole populations align their behavior to natural law, the universal moral laws of creation. Therefore, anarchy can only be created through a correct understanding of objective morality under natural law. It cannot be created any other way. It's impossible. Therefore, we have to understand which actions are rights because they are not only based in truth and we have a correct understanding of them, but they are actions which are in harmony with natural law because they do not initiate harm to other sentient beings. And hence, that's why we call them a right. A right is an action that does not initiate harm to other sentient beings. And most people can't give you that definition. That's why they're losing their rights. You ask people what is a right, they can't define it correctly. They'll give you a million other answers and definitions. They don't even understand it's an action. It's an action that is in harmony with natural law because it does not initiate harm to another sentient being. As soon as you've conducted an action that does initiate harm to another sentient being, you've conducted an immoral behavior and you're in the wrong. And that's a wrongdoing or a transgression against natural law. Wrongs are incorrect. They are not based in truth. They are behaviors which are in opposition to natural law because they do initiate harm to other sentient beings. Once again, animals are not held to this standard of behavior because they do not have the intellectual and the capacity of intelligence, of holistic intelligence, to truly understand this difference in the natural world. That's why they are instinctive response creatures. Instinct response mechanisms largely govern their behavior, not reason and thought processes and judgment. They don't have the brain capable for that. We do. We absolutely do. It's not my opinion, it's fact. It's not my opinion that animals don't have that capacity of judgment through intelligence. That's also fact. It's objectively true. It's not a subjective opinion that I'm throwing out there. If you're honest with yourself, if you studied this dynamic enough through not only biology, through not only psychology, through not only physiology, but also through the world of the occult, which again is not a religion. It's hidden science. So we have to understand the difference between right and wrong to be imbued with conscience. Conscience is knowledge. It is not the action. The exercise of conscience is the action. See, this is where people also get it wrong. You ask them, what is conscience? Is conscience emotion? Is conscience behavior? Or is conscience knowledge? And most people will get it wrong. They will not accurately answer conscience is knowledge. It literally comes from the root of the word, con, together or with in Latin. C-O-N, the prefix in Latin meaning with or together. And then sciere, which we get the word science from, the second part of the word conscience, conscience, means knowledge. So it's knowing together, common knowledge, common sense. And unfortunately, conscience isn't common sense. It's anything but common sense in our world because we're people that don't have this common knowledge. We're people that don't have this common sense. Morality, objective morality, should be common sense by this point in our evolutionary development in humanity, but it's being held back. It's being held back by mind control. It's being held back by religion, which we're going to talk a lot about. Again, to even get to the concepts of fake anarchists, we have to lay this as a foundation. All of this psychology has to be laid foundationally first before even delving into the different types of anarchists. True anarchy can only manifest, and I have an error here I'm going to correct. It's when true anarchy can only manifest when whole populations align their behavior to natural law. And let me fix that on the slide before as well. Hold on. Let's just do it this way. All right. Much better. So once again, natural law versus human law are completely, entirely different things. One is inherent in nature and one is a constructural idea. Natural law exists inherently in the natural world, in creation, in nature. Again, the word natural, neter in Egyptian, means God, and al is Sanskrit meaning of or related to or having to do with. The word natural means it's of God, it's from God, it's having to do with God, not having to do with man. Natural law is God's law. Nature is God's domain. People don't even understand that the word nature means from God. You know, natural food is God put it on the planet. The force of creation. You could say it however you want if you are uncomfortable with God, with the word God, because of its connotations to religion. Natural law is based upon principles and truth and is inherent to creation. Human law, so-called law, which are just decrees of psychopaths, is based upon dogmatic beliefs, which are constructs of the mind. See, it's the exact other way around. People think, oh, human laws are genuine and actually exist because they're written decrees. No, they're constructural ideas of the mind. Natural law exists inherent to creation. See, my whole work, ladies and gentlemen, is ultimately about the distinction between the natural domain and the artificial domain. It is about the realm of the real versus the realm of falsehood and imagination, of imagination gone haywire. Okay? It is reality versus fantasy. Natural law is in the state of reality. Human law is a product of fantasy and false imagination. Imagination run rampant and haywire. Of people imagining that they could do things that they do not have the right to do. Human law is constructs of mind. Natural law is inherent to reality. Natural law can only be harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding. You're not going to be, quote unquote, directly punished by natural law. That's not how natural law works. It works over time and over the aggregate population. And we find ourselves in a prison of our own design over time. Human law is feared and complied with only because of fear of punishment. People comply with human law only because of the violent punishment that they'll have happen to them if they refuse to comply. Even if the law is making a claim that they can't do something that they do have the right to do because it does not initiate harm. Not just when it's a law that says don't do this because that actually is morally wrong against somebody and will punish you for doing it. So are we harmonizing with that which is real, or are we just fearing something that was a claim from someone else just because we fear the punishment? You know, look at the whole scamdemic. How many people complied with the bullshit that politicians decreed during this whole nonsense time period that's still going on in most places? All complying with due to fear of punishment, not because people really thought it was morally the right thing to do, because they know inherently it's a crock of shit. Natural law is universal. It exists and applies anywhere in the universe, regardless of location. We already talked about that. You know, if you don't understand the immoral things that were done during this whole pandemic, go download the Pfizer documents. You know, and just type that in and go find them somewhere. Probably censored most places. I'm sure you could find them on torrent sites and IPFS. And then you'll see what they covered up, all the side effects of the alleged vaccines, so-called genetic modification experiments performed upon humanity without their informed consent. Human law differs with location based upon the whim of legislators. That's called moral relativism. You go to one place, the laws are completely different than in another place. What you'll be punished for in one place, you could do freely in another. And people think this makes any fucking sense? You actually believe that makes any fucking sense? How could that possibly make sense? A right is a right everywhere. A wrong is a wrong everywhere. Right and wrong don't change with location. So in one place, I can carry a firearm concealed with no permit. And in another place, if I do that with no permit, I could be jailed. So which is correct? Which one is correct? Are all the places, there's like, I think 19 states now, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but I think it's 19, that you don't require, it might even be more than that now, you do not require a permit to carry a firearm concealed. So are they wrong? Are those decrees immoral? And many idiots would say yes, because they're fucking idiots and don't understand the right of self-defense, and they don't understand what a right is. Simply concealing a firearm and carrying it in public is not harming anybody. If you did a violent behavior with them by initiating harm to somebody that you had no right to initiate, and you conducted harm through that initiation of force, then you've conducted harm. Then you've done a wrongdoing. Then it wouldn't be a right. But simply concealing a firearm and walking publicly with it is a right of every human being. You are not causing harm, therefore it is a right. You are not initiating harm, therefore it is a right. So the places that say, no, that's not a right, you need a permit. We have to permit that because it's illegal until we permit it. They're preventing a right from being conducted and exercised. Therefore, they're doing a wrongdoing. That's coercion. That's duress. Saying there will be punishment if you don't comply with our wishes, if your will doesn't conform with our decrees. But people can't even see, how could one place have one set of rules and another place have another set of rules? It's perfectly fine to do something here, and in another place, if you do it, you'll be jailed, you'll be caged. And people don't even see the inherent contradiction and moral relativism in that. So then you got to ask the question, who has it right? Or do both have it wrong? You know? There are sets of different laws in different places, and they're all wrong. In the case of states that do allow open and concealed carry without a permit, they have it right because they understand at least that the right when it comes to owning and bearing a firearm, whether you want to carry it open or concealed. That's your choice. That's your right. You're not harming anybody through that actual behavior. Natural law is eternal and immutable. It exists and applies forever and cannot be changed by any action of humankind. Human law changes with time based on the whim of legislators. And again, that's moral relativism, which we're going to talk about a lot later. How could prohibition have been set up and made alcohol creation and consumption illegal and therefore punishable by law? And somebody could be thrown in a cage for doing it in the 1920s. First, it was okay. It was a right. Then they made it illegal. Then they repealed prohibition and made it a right again. So according to these fucking psychopaths in government, they believe they have a right at any given time to say what human rights are. And this could be a right today, and tomorrow we could repeal it, and we could say that's no longer a right, and then we could repeal that law and say it's a right again at some future time. Could you imagine this? Just like you have a right to go in public spaces without a mask, then you have to wear a mask, then they repeal the restriction, and now you cannot wear a mask again. Just because of alleged danger that they claim. See, and that's how they're always going to sell you the violence. They're always going to sell you the violence, that this violence has to be in place through our law because it'll keep people safe. Every single solitary psychopath and tyrant in the history of humanity has claimed safety for setting up their brand of totalitarianism and tyranny. Every single solitary time. And people are just so fucking dumb, they fall for it over and over and over and over and over again. How can't people see through the ruse? Because psychopaths are really good at pretending to be like other people. They're good at pretending they care. Just like people who are total fakes and phonies. They wear that mask. They act like the real article. They claim to be the real article. They tell you that they're the real article. And yet there's a total fucking psychopath lurking under the mask. We have to pull the mask away and see who's really under it. You know? And unfortunately, they'll keep doing the same psychological tactics over and over and over again as long as we don't wise up to them. So let's talk about this dynamic. Anarchists in name only. Anything in name only. You could substitute anything you want in between the double quotes, folks. Okay? You could substitute anything you want in there. Christians in name only. Right? I did a whole presentation called Fake Ass Christians, which explained this dynamic. They say there's rhinos, Republicans in name only. I've heard people, and I've myself coined the term linos, libertarians in name only. There's anarchists in name only. There's Freemasons in name only. There's Rosicrucians in name only. There's Kabbalists in name only. On and on and on. Thelemites in name only. You know, you could go on and on with people pretending to be something they're not. The concept of in name only just means it's not the genuine article. It's not the real thing. They're claiming to be it, but they're not that thing. See, this is how the whole psyop works. Government and other people who want to maintain the status quo and they're members of the ruling class or the occult class. They want to maintain their power. They want to maintain their influence in society. They want to maintain society as it has always been, a state of slavery. And they want to be the masters over slaves. They run this psyop about anarchy. And they put all these there. They create psychologically all these different factions of anarchy. And they put them out there. They float them out there to society to latch onto and to become a, quote, member of. And then call yourself an anarchist, one of these hyphenated anarchists, right? And what that does is that makes the genuine article look bad in the eyes of the beholder. And other people see the thought process and the behavior. and the bad intentions of all these fake anarchists, and they go, why in God's name would I want to be that? Why would I want to be one of those? Why would I want to subscribe to the idea of anarchy that these people are putting forward? Because it's not the genuine article. It's put out there as a psychological diversion tactic, a psyop, to get other people, to get the mass of people who don't know anything about anarchy to believe that these false forms of anarchy are the real thing. And then to hate them, to not like them, but to not like anarchy in that process. They genuinely should dislike these fake forms of anarchy. But what it does is it throws the baby out with the bathwater. And then people say, oh, look at these dumbass anarcho-communists. And if that's what anarchy is, I want nothing to do with it. Exactly. I don't want anything to do with their so-called form of anarchy, quote unquote, either. It's not the real thing. You know? And that's the problem, folks. People so easily fall for this diversion and psychological warfare tactic because they don't understand this is how psychopaths operate. They put out the fake to get you to hate the real. They put the fake out there and float it out to you to get you to hate the genuine article. And there's tons and tons and tons and tons of fake forms of anarchists. Anyone in the world can claim to be something that they're most certainly not. But in reality, if their thoughts and behaviors do not align with what they claim to be, they are most certainly not what they claim to be. They are, in fact, inauthentic beings. They're phonies. They're fakes. Sadly, most people fail to understand this dynamic or realize that it is taking place in just about every aspect of human life. As I said, fake-ass everything. You can name the institution. There's fake-ass doctors. They're not out there to help anybody. They're out there to profit. There's fake-ass lawyers, which I don't think we even need the profession at all, but, you know, they claim to want justice to be served, and they're doing anything but that. They're following along with corruption. They're not fighting for actual rights. They're not speaking up. They're just following along with the status quo and the corruption that's already entrenched just for a paycheck. Fake-ass media. They're not journalists. Fake-ass journalists. They're not journalists at all. They're not media. They're not journalists. They're the vocal propaganda arm of the intelligence agencies and the occult ruling class. You know, they're not doing any real journalism. They're just claiming to be journalists, and they're outright liar whores who are propagandists. And they're not reporting what's really going on in our world and informing people at all. Fake-ass religionists of every persuasion. There's fake-ass Christians, fake-ass Jews, fake-ass Muslims. You know, you can go on and on. Even the esoteric traditions, fake-ass Rosicrucians, fake-ass Kabbalists, fake-ass Freemasons, who aren't teaching the esoteric traditions of consciousness and morality. They're just in there to network with other people. They're just in there to do business networking and or get personal power that they would get from collaborating and, rubbing elbows with people in those institutions and secret societies in some cases. There's fake-ass occultists, people who think they understand the occult and only use it for quote-unquote lesser magic. They're not trying to influence things for the betterment of all of creation and move the will of creation forward. They're in it for themselves. They're in it to, I want to gain this knowledge that this occult tradition had so I can get something for myself. That's a fake-ass occultist. That isn't real occultism. Lesser magic has always been a fake form of occultism to attract people who are deeply ensconced in ego, deeply embedded in their own ego. Never was occult. Never was magic. That's just a carrot on a stick in front of the donkey, thinking that they're going to get something. So there's fake ass every tradition you could possibly think of. Again, I gave a presentation back in 2017 here in Philadelphia called Fake Ass Christians. Pretty scathing expose of people who claim to be Christian in their thoughts and deeds, and they represent nothing of the kind. You know, they're false religionists, period, and especially false Christians. And people go, oh, Christ never existed as a being, so there's no such thing as a real Christian. You know, I'm just so fucking tired of even having to explain. It doesn't matter. The historicity of Jesus Christ as a biblical figure does not matter. It's an allegorical, moral tale in the New Testament being told to help people to understand all of the corruption of the major institutions of our world, because the institutions that, set up and eventually murder the Jesus figure in the New Testament allegorically represent, or no, they don't even allegorically, they directly represent the three unholy institutions that are still in control of our world. It starts with religion. Jesus is teaching things spiritually that are not in the same context as the established religious institutions, the Pharisees and Sadducees in Judea. And he is teaching something that directly conflicts with all of their existing teachings of Jewish law. And so he's seen as an iconoclast, as a rebel, as a heretic. And they're the ones who start his problems. Okay, which is the religious institutions. Religion is one of the number one, aspects of the unholy trinity. Then you have the monetary system. Well, the established banking institutions of the day in that region of the world were the temple coin changers, who changed Roman coinage for the Jewish temple coin to go into the temple and worship and present that as your sacrifice or your tithing. And Jesus saw the completely ridiculous exchange rate that these bankers were giving and profiting off of. And so he threw their tables over and said, the temple isn't a place of business or a marketplace. It's supposed to be a place of the worship of God and understanding the real laws of the Creator, which is natural law. And they had very high level, these two organizations, the Pharisees and Sadducees, and of course the temple money changers, had very high level influence with the Roman authorities, the government. So there you have the three institutions. You have religion, money, and government, all in collusion. Eventually, the first two, the religious institutions and the banking institutions, clamor for Jesus' death to the Roman authority in the form of Pilate, who was a Roman consul and, ruling that area at the time. And he basically doesn't really want to get involved, so he eventually, lets them rule for themselves, and they rule to crucify him. He gives the judgment to the people to either crucify Jesus or release him, and they choose a murderer and a rapist to let go instead of a good man who was speaking the truth, showing that the people are just immoral savages who want there to be all of this corruption and injustice, and because they're bad people. They want to let a murderer go instead of somebody speaking the truth just because he was speaking something that was uncomfortable to them. And they cry out with one voice, release Barabbas, instead of releasing Jesus. Pilate washes his hands of this incident and turns Jesus over to be crucified. It's an allegory, folks. Okay? So yes, there is such a thing as a real Christian. It's a person who embodies those principles, that's going to stick to their guns even up to their death, as long as they're telling the truth and they're in the right and they're standing in a place of righteousness. You don't get it. That's what it means to be Christian. You don't need to believe in the concept of Jesus being the savior of humanity and God's son, quote unquote. That's taking the ideas of the Roman Sol Invictus and the unconquerable son and applying them to the New Testament, teachings and stories. But, it is about being the savior in the form of higher consciousness is going to save humanity. A Christed consciousness that lives like this is going to act as the savior of humanity if we all do it. Not if one person does it. If one person does it, they're going to get killed. If everybody takes that example, we can change reality. We could set an example for others. And again, it's not to say don't do it even if you're the only person and you're going to get killed for doing it. Still do it. That's the example that is set, that level of courage. Being in the right, knowing morality, having that level of courage. All great allegorical principles to live by, if you can separate it from the dogma of the religious tradition that was built up around it to dissuade people from studying the actual allegorical content of the teachings. Do you see how clever and manipulative the rulers of our society are? They take everything that has purity and is capable of truly transforming the world for the better, and they have to give you a false form of it to get you to look at it as shit. Instead of looking at the original teaching, the original meaning, the original intent, which is not shit, which is powerfully transformative for the good. And understanding it from that high level perspective instead of the bullshit garbage perspective that religion provides and that these fake forms of it provide. I wanted to deliver this presentation in such an extended way because it's so powerful to understand that concept. You have to understand how important and powerful of a psychological tactic it is for the real rulers of society to give us the false variance of something. Because then we throw the baby out with the bathwater and we say, oh, all of this is this thing and we want nothing to do with that. I still see people do this with the occult. They insist all of the occult is garbage. There's no positive teaching that can be gleaned through any of these traditions. And they throw it all out. Nothing could be further from the truth. And there's no more of a completely idiotic mindset to follow than that. It shows how dumb somebody is, how ill-read they are, how completely easily fucking fooled they are when they say things like that. And I still see it every single solitary day online through the biggest fucking imbeciles, the biggest fucking idiots out there are the loudest, most vocal morons. They're the ones who want to smear their verbal feces all over the internet. And they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Their opening of their mouth makes them look so fucking dumb that they should be embarrassed. Horrifically embarrassed for themselves. And they're too dumb to be embarrassed for themselves. The problem is, you could say, why worry about those people, Mark? There's an answer. There's a reason. Because most other people are even more stupid than them. And they're being dissuaded from looking into something that is powerful and positive just by what this one fucking idiot says. That's why it has to be contradicted. That's why we have to speak out and say, no, it's you who doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about, loser. You're unread. You don't know what you're talking about. You're putting out an ill-informed opinion when you clearly know nothing about it just by the opening of your fucking mouth. Not enough people want to do that and rock the boat. Those people are wrong. There is powerful information to be gleaned from the teachings of the occult. Positive, powerful, transformative information for the betterment of humanity. And that's why it's been occulted. It's been hidden and called the hidden knowledge, the occulted knowledge. Because the ruling class knows that if everybody knows this and the playing board is leveled through that knowledge, we're done. The ruling class is done and over. So what do? They try to make everybody identify with the negative aspects of it, and then they get people who could take that knowledge and use it for the better if they learn it. They get them saying, we want nothing to do with, it's all shit, it's all bad. And this is exactly the technique they use with the fake anarchist factions, the hyphenated forms of so-called anarchism, which aren't anarchism at all. They're called that by name only, And they have nothing to do with what real anarchy is. Zero. So instead of going through all the factions one at a time, and I will say something about each one of them, what I want to start doing here in this section is presenting categories of fake anarchists. So we have to look at, you can look at each sect or faction individually. Yes, you can do that, right? But really, you can also group these sects into categories. And the categories have certain characteristics and dynamics that are the overarching principles, goals, or characteristics of that entire category of factions, right? And the people who belong to these factions and categories all have a certain type of worldview and mindset that is false, that is incorrect, that if we break it down, we see the inherent logical fallacies and logical contradictions within them. And then we can see why this is the psyop. This is the psychological warfare tactic to get people to embody these completely ridiculous ideas, completely ridiculous behaviors, and then the rest of society looks at them and goes, look at these fucking idiot anarchists fucking up everything. Look at what they think is a good idea. They're total fucking morons. I don't want to be an anarchist. I don't want anything to do with anarchism. And then what do? They go out and get right back involved in the political process and voting and all of this other nonsense of picking a fucking master. Because they've been shown a false version of what anarchy is before they ever learn what the real article is. What the genuine article really is. It's a brilliant psychological warfare tactic from the perspective of those who are wielding it. And they don't have to alter the method. The method has always worked, and it will continue to work as long as humanity remains in the ignorance that it's currently in. And I see no reason to think that ignorance is going to change. If people get their fucking ego out of the way and listen to what I've been saying for nearly the last 20 fucking years, maybe their ignorance level will change, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. At least not anytime soon. Maybe they will when they're really getting physically hurt bad. Maybe when warfare breaks out here. Maybe when things get so bad here that their property is taken away and they have no property. When they really are made to live like a slave and forced to work. Or when they have their body harmed badly enough that they go, wow, I should have listened to the people who were telling me that this condition was coming for a long, long, long time. Maybe. Maybe even then they'll turn to the tactics that many Jewish people did while they were being held in concentration camps and were still saying this is for our own good. Many of them would not accept the fact that they were having human experimentation conducted directly upon their brain and other organs while they were alive, against their will, coming back to their camp, coming back to their barracks in their concentration camp, lobotomized, and their other fellow Jewish prisoners looking at them and saying, there must have been a good reason why they would have done this to them, because it can't be that we're just slaves of the Nazi Third Reich regime and that they're going to exterminate us next. No. Many of them actually still believe that this was for some type of a greater good. That's how brainwashed the population is. They're killing people with these biological weapons that they call vaccines right now, which are rewriting the aspect of the DNA that is for encoding sequences of other DNA sequences, the RNA. And it's destroying the human immune system as a result over time. That's what antibody-dependent enhancement is. It is actually the reduction of the immune system over a period of time, if you really want to get into the physiology of it and the biology of it. And people are still saying this is for the greater good. That is how much safety and the greater good are used as excuses for tyrants to eradicate people that they don't want around. And that's what's going on. We're in the early stages of it, but make no mistake, history is repeating itself. So let's look at some of these anarchist factions, anarchist categories, as I like to call them, also known as hyphenated forms of anarchism, in quotes, because it's not the real thing. So we have many different examples of left-wing anarchism. Left-leaning, fully left-wing, fully leftist. Some of the examples of these categories of anarchists are anarcho-communism, as I mentioned earlier, anarcho-syndicalism, black bloc anarchists, so-called, and of course the ever-popular Antifa, standing for anti-fascist. Which are very closely aligned with anarcho-communists. One of the things that we have to do when we look at these categories of fake anarchists or hyphenated anarchists is we have to break down their ideologies and realize that in general, this entire category has similar overarching ideologies. And some of them will cross over into other groups. But in general, this is their worldview. This is the characteristics of their worldview and their mindset. So the ideologies of left-wing categories of anarchism, so-called, include Marxism, which obviously is the root of communism. And, you could extend Marxism again, the writings and philosophy of Karl Marx, along with Frederick Engels, member of the Communist League, started by the occultist Karl Schapper, which many people have never heard the name. Karl Schapper was under the tutelage, he ran an organization called Young Germany, which was patterned after another occult organization called Young Italy, also communist-leaning, Marxist-leaning. Young Italy was an organization run by a very, very close friend of the occultist and communist Karl Schapper, who started the Communist League and started the organization called Young Germany. One of his best friends and fellow occultists was the person who began Young Italy, the communist group in the nation of Italy, Giuseppe Mazzini. Now, for people who do know a little bit about the occult, you will then understand that Mazzini was the second Grand Master of the Bavarian Illuminati, the group after which people call the ruling elite today, which is a misnomer. And I really personally don't like the term, the Illuminati, for these sick, psychopathic, freak show Satanists. I would rather call them the low-life garbage Nazi losers than the Illuminati, because Illuminati has absolutely nothing to do with what these people are. Illuminati meaning the illuminated, the enlightened. The actual former name of the group that Mazzini became the second Grand Master of, it was originally headed, of course, by Adam Weishaupt of Bavaria, was the Perfectibilists. And I'm getting into the history of this a little bit because this is going to be covered in my presentation down the line, which is still not fully ready. Not going to be for, I think, quite some time because of how big the scope of the information is, called The Dark Occult Origins of Nazism and Communism. You realize that communism in general and the forms of leftism that we're seeing today are a direct plan of the original Bavarian Illuminati, headed by Weishaupt, and then taken over by Giuseppe Mazzini, Italian communist. Mazzini, again, was very, very close friends during his life, a fellow compatriot, comrade, and occultist with Karl Schapper, who was one of the people who began the Communist League, of which Karl Marx and Frederick Engels were simply members of, and were charged to write the Communist Manifesto and put out the other ideas that were being championed by these occult organizations that many people have no clue about. It's like getting into the Teutonic Order of Germany and the Tool Society, and the things like the Edelweiss Order, groups that people have zero idea about, ideologies like theozoology and Armanism, that people have no clue. Even today, you're seeing no clue that these occult organizations began Nazi Germany and started the German Workers' Party, which eventually became the NSDP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, from where we get the term Nazi. Fascism and communism have common occult roots. Make no mistake about it. If you still don't understand that, you're just dumb, son. You're just dumb. You haven't done enough reading and researching. You can't even explain the connections like that because you don't know enough. You're just a person that accepts his face value what was given to you in history books that were written by the Rockefeller Foundation. And that makes you just dumb, son. Sorry to just say it that way, but it's true. You got to get your head out from up your ass and you need to research seriously, in depth. And that's what I do, is I present my research findings in presentations. A presentation like this represents years of research. A presentation like the dark occult origins of Nazism and communism is going to represent over a decade of research. And I don't mean passive, light research. I'm talking like obsessive. And this is something that very few people do because they don't want to take the time and sacrifice the effort to do it. But, still to this day, you see people who insist something like the Black Sun Order was not an occult order in Germany and just had political leanings. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about, scumbag. And I'm going to do direct ad hominem attacks to people like that. I could explain it fully logically, and I'm still going to call you a scumbag and a loser and a dumbass. It is so blatantly obvious that the SS were part of an inner order, that members of the SS were part of an inner order of occultists, started by Himmler and others, and other high-level occultists in the Third Reich. Paved the way by other occultists like Guido von List and Karl Willigut and Baron Sabatendorf. You could go on and on with all of the connections to the occult, to the dark occult, to Satanism. And people still want to insist that neo-Nazis wearing insignias of the Black Sun in some of the regiments of the Ukrainian military. And here, I'm not taking sides in this conflict, folks. It's all government orchestrated, so it's all order followers, essentially. But look at the Black Sun patches worn out in the open. No, they're not neo-Nazis, no. They're fighting the bad guys. As if there is any distinction in orchestrated government-sponsored combat between good guys and bad guys. This isn't true war. This isn't righteous war. This is all staged destabilization. And that's all it ever is when it's driven by the government is telling you who you should shoot at. When people realize who the bad guy really is, they'll be shooting at the government, not at each other, regardless of where they live and what their political persuasion or ideologies are. They haven't figured that the fuck out yet because they're dumb. And they wield the banners of Marxism, of the early ideologies that paved the way for communism, the early ideologies that paved the way for Nazism. And it's all ultimately the same thing, folks. You see, left and right wing are just the same thing. They lead to totalitarianism. They lead to further authoritarianism and totalitarianism and authoritarianism. So you're not going to any different place by following Marxism any more than you're going to a different place by following Nazism. You know? But, you know, don't tell me as a former occultist what I know about the occult. You know? Go spout it to some fucking imbecile who doesn't know any better. You're not going to get one over on this one because I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Not from a perspective of book knowledge, but from a perspective of first-hand life experience. So I know what the black sun represents. I've been around plenty of Satanists wielding it. I studied it in depth because I saw it so much when I was involved in Satanism and didn't know what it meant back then. Well, I do now. You know? And I'll be getting into stuff like that. You know, I covered it a little bit in Demystifying the Occult Part 2, Satanism and the Dark Occult, but I will definitely be getting into that in a big way in Dark Occult Origins of Nazism and Communism. So their ideologies are the ones that pave the way to communism, Marxism, Leninism, Trotskyism, all forms of socialism leading to full-blown communism supported by the state. People who think, oh, it's populist socialism, it's democratic socialism. That's a stepping stone, dumbass. It's a stepping stone to full-blown communism. Marx will tell you that in his writings, that private property is going to be abolished. You know, that's one of the tenets here. Abolition of capitalism, abolition of private property. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Does that sound familiar? Abolition of wage labor. No, because everybody will just be given a job to do, and if you don't do it, you'll be thrown in a fucking gulag. Collective ownership, which there is no such thing. There is only private ownership. There's no such thing as collective ownership. There is making a claim of private ownership that isn't true, but when you own something, you're the sole decider of what is done with it, of how it is used. Again, the characteristics of ownership: lawful possession, you know, a rightful claim of possession upon it, being responsible with it, and maintaining it. Its proper upkeep. You're responsible for it. You're responsible for maintaining it. You can't really do that collectively with someone else because conflicts of interest always come up when it comes to ownership. I can't really jointly own the computer that I'm using because if I need it today and so does someone else, we'd, probably argue about the way that it is used and the time frame. And yeah, you could claim, you could eventually come to compromises about that, but that's what they are. It's not ownership. That's why no one can own another person. Owning someone means you decide what gets to be done with it. No one can decide what is done with someone else's life. That's not their property. Their body is their property. No one can decide how much of the product of someone else's labor someone keeps, because that's done with their body, which is their property, and therefore the labor is an extension of their property, the body. That's why ownership is real. Ownership is true. Ownership exists in the natural world. Ownership is inherent to the natural world because the things that ownership comprises and the characteristics of it exist in the natural world. It's not a construct. It's not a mental construct. It's not an idea that only exists constructurally in the mind. A physical house is a means of shelter from the elements that exists in the natural world. A method of transportation is an object that exists in the natural world that is there for a utilitarian purpose. A computer, again, an object, a product of labor existing in the natural world that one would then rightfully acquire by an exchange of goods or services to obtain it rightfully. Therefore, that's my property. I'm using it. I'm responsible for it. I'm upkeeping it. They want to abolish that. They want to abolish ownership. And they claim they're going to institute collective ownership of the means of production of goods and services. Once again, there really is no such thing as collective ownership. That means the state owns it. That means they claim society owns it, but the arbiters of that ownership would be the party, the state. And this is all well known, well stated in their writings, in their intention. Anybody can confirm it for themselves. They want the state to essentially own all goods and services and mete them out to people as the state sees fit. This is what Marxism, this is what communism is. And then they'll make this ridiculous claim that once the state has that, and in their wisdom and their beneficence, they are going to mete out the products and services and goods out to society according to the people's needs. And then no one will want for anything. And so the state can then be dissolved because it will have performed and accomplished its rightful purpose in life for existing at all. And it will give up all of that power, that total power of having all of the food, all of the things, all of the services that people need to live. And it will then give up all of that power and dissolve itself. Yeah, this is how crazy the leftist ultimate belief in socialism and leading to communism actually is. That's what Marxism is, folks. And who gave it to the people of the world? The same people who gave all the false forms of anarchism to the people of the world, who gave all the false forms of religion to the people of the world. Dark occultists, who were the people who ultimately gave rise to the entire concept of Marxism, socialism, and communism because they knew it was a perfect control method for dumb motherfuckers who want to believe in their naivete and in their pure ignorance that this could ever work, that this would not lead to anything except bloodshed and death and starvation, which is what it has led to, and murdered well over 200 million people in the past 100 years alone. And people want to say anything good can come of these ideologies, or it wasn't done the right way. Now, I guess enough people weren't starved and murdered by their own governments. They believe capitalism per se is the problem. Obviously, there's a form of fake capitalism, which again, they do it with that. There's false forms of capitalism, crony capitalism, that they want to say is the real thing, so people blame that as being the problem. Well, we don't have true open markets. We don't have true market-regulated markets instead of government-regulated ones. We don't have an agora. You know, we have a totally crony government-controlled form of so-called capitalism, which is nothing of what capitalism truly is. Not that I even think that's the savior. Higher consciousness is the savior. Understanding natural law is the savior. Living in harmony with natural law is the savior. Not capitalism, not money. But these leftists believe that, in all of these groups, believe that capitalism is the problem and abolishing capitalism will create true freedom. See, they all have something that they blame as the enemy, and they all believe abolishing that enemy will lead to true freedom. And we'll see with all the different groups who the enemy is or what the enemy is, and they believe they'll just take that out, and then society will be free. And it just shows you what mental midgets they are. It just shows you how dumb these people are, how naive, how childish. They're just like children who have never logically thought anything through. They read the philosophy of Marx, who was given to him by Schapper, of course, and ultimately down through the Bavarian Illuminati through Weishaupt before him. Through Mazzini, I'm sorry. You know, Mazzini and Schapper ultimately gave Marx and Engels the tenets of the Communist Manifesto and tried to get them implemented in a popular fashion. And people don't know this. They're just dumb as a bag of sand. you know. And they won't look into the occult because they've been told, oh, that's all nonsense. You don't need to look at that. I just look at these people as just like little fucking baby children. Like you're just a fucking, you're a mental child. Your IQ is so fucking low, and your level of being read as a human being, what you've taken in so far as actual long history and reading true philosophy and understanding the real movements and machinations politically and ideologically of different groups throughout society through human history. You're so fucking babyishly naive when it comes to how real human history has unfolded that I almost feel sorry for them if they weren't doing such damage to my freedom and the freedom of other people that I care about. I don't really feel sorry for them. Their ignorance is a choice. But you are a fucking child in a cradle sucking your fucking pacifier. If you believe you're some kind of a fucking educated person, you're a dumb, dunce loser. I'll say that to every one of you right to your fucking face, morons. All of you. This goes the same thing for all the other forms of so-called anarchists that are fakes. You're just dumb fucking people. You're ill-read. You don't know about what really led to the things that you believe in. You just accept them on their face as if somebody came up with them of pure and good intent, and they did not. You are wrong. You are factually wrong and morally wrong because you're factually wrong. That's why I keep saying to people over and over again, being right is all that matters. Being right factually is going to lead you to acting morally right. When you're wrong factually and you accept wrong ideas, incorrect ideas, that's going to lead you to incorrect, immoral behaviors. Morally, you're going to enact immoral behavior, and that's what's going to further enslave humanity. And these people are such dumb little fucking children, they don't even understand how any of those principles work, let alone know that they're wrong about the origins of their bullshit ideology. So I'll be laying all this out, and let me tell you something, folks. The research that I've done with this, and I'm continuing to do, because the research isn't done, the slides aren't even started. The research is still ongoing to lay out an outline. When I deliver this presentation eventually, probably at some point later in the year or probably next year, to be honest, is going to blow people's minds. It's going to blow their minds when you see the connections between occult organizations and who began communism and who began Nazism. And if you really study it and understand it, you take the ball I'm going to give you with my findings and you run with the research, then you're really going to be amazed and astounded. And again, I don't want to put a definitive date on it because it's so big. My guess is it's going to be an 8-hour presentation. So let's move on to the next form of anarchism, which is right-wing anarchism. Don't think I would leave these wonderful gentlemen out. And again, they might have some of the principles down, right? They may be close. I call this close but no cigar anarchism, right? And a lot of the people listening to my show may be these forms of anarchists, right? And I'm not going to knock voluntarism too much. I get that they're on to the non-aggression principle, most certainly. Okay, so here we do have to take the baby and separate it from the bathwater. And there is some bathwater, but there's a lot of baby there as well. Okay, so I may, see this as a little bit closer to the truth of what real anarchism is, but I'm still going to put it in double quotes. Right-wing anarchism has its problems as well. And you see, folks, I should have inserted the political spectrum in here, right? What they teach as the political spectrum, the alternative political spectrum, which is closer to the real one, and then my political spectrum, the one that I created myself to explain to people how states of humanity really function. So I'll actually make charts of them for next week, okay? I'm going to make slides about the season of sacrifice to start the show next week, and I'm going to show you the 3 political spectrums. I'll just briefly talk about it. The classical political spectrum is left versus right, with left on the right side, right on the right side, centrism in the middle, and there's no state where there is no government. No condition on that chart where there is no government. They say that left-wing extremism leads to communism, totalitarianism, communist totalitarianism, and right-wing extremism leads to fascist totalitarianism, which is true. These are true. But then in the middle it says centrist, meaning you are a moderate. You are a blend between right-wing and left-wing and have some characteristics of both sides of the political spectrum. That places no room on the political spectrum for those who don't believe in the concept of authority, who know that the concept of authority is morally illegitimate and don't agree with government in any form whatsoever. Okay? So that's a false dialectic, right? That's the Hegelian dialectic. You give them the 2 false choices and they have to pick between one. Both lead to slavery. That's the traditional political spectrum taught in civics and history classes, which is completely false. That's the left-right paradigm that most people fall into, and so they choose a master and remain slaves. The non-traditional or alternative political spectrum sees it as a left versus right also, but it places all totalitarian forms on the farthest left, which is truer to how it really works. Leftism is complete totalitarianism, whether it is fascist or communist. See, fascism is still authoritarianism. So you should be looking at pure leftism as authoritarianism. And that's what they're revealing that they are in the modern day. They're revealing they're simply totalitarians and want government to have control over every aspect of human life. Okay? So instead of looking at it as leftism, look at it as authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is placed all the way to the left of the graph. So you have all forms of totalitarian regimes, whether they are communist, fascist, or otherwise. You could have dictatorship, you could have caliphates, you could have pure religious denominations ruling, which are theocracies, on and on. Okay? All different forms of claimed authority to the left. And then as you move to the right, you have further and further degrees of true freedom. So in the middle somewhere, you'd have constitutional republic. To the right of that, you would have libertarian. To the right of that, you would have extreme limited forms of government in the form of simple protectorate or local protectorate. And then you would move toward true anarchy, which is all the way to the right. So when I say I'm not left-wing or right-wing, I mean I'm not classical left-wing or right-wing anything. I don't believe in communism. I'm not a leftist. I don't believe in socialism. I don't believe in the path to leftism. I know that's a path to totalitarianism. I don't believe in rampant greed in the form of crony capitalism and government manipulation. That's a form of right-wing, neoconism, right? And then I don't even believe in libertarianism to the extent that I don't believe in limited government at all. I don't believe in any form of authority. So I'm not right-wing leaning either in that traditional political spectrum. On the alternative political spectrum, you would have to place my knowledge, my understanding, infinitely to the right, which is 100% total anarchy if totalitarianism is infinitely to the left. So I am against all forms of control, all forms of authority. So in that spectrum, I would be an infinite rightist. People who are of limited government belief, libertarianist, constitutional republic, constitutionalist, any form of limited government, they are way to the left of where I am at. That's why I say in that spectrum, they haven't gone far right enough. So here, if we look at it according to the traditional political spectrum, yes, these people are right-leaning. But if we look at it on the alternative political spectrum, I would say they're not far right enough. I haven't invented or portrayed a new and wholly different political spectrum, which integrates the function of consciousness. And in that political spectrum graph, there's a new direction, which is up. If consciousness is low, you're down. And if consciousness is high, you go up on the graph. And it looks like a needle, like a spike, like a mountain with a big needle at the top, because the sides of left and right are asymptotic. They're not linear. They're functions that are asymptotic functions, or like parabolas, exponential. It's an exponential function, that the higher consciousness goes, the more freedom there is, and the lower it goes, the more totalitarianism there is. So it's an exponential function. And freedom is at the very top point, indicating that it is a very delicate point to be at because it involves the highest consciousness. And if you slip off of that consciousness at all, you are going into forms of tyranny that are slippery slopes, because there is no authority in nature. It's a mental construct that has to be purged as a virus of the mind and a virus of the soul. So let's look at, you could see this on the traditional political spectrum as right-wing leaning, but I would just say these are people that don't understand freedom fully enough. They have to go on the alternative political spectrum farther to the right, or they have to go on my political spectrum higher in consciousness to get to where real freedom lies. And the graphs that I'll show you next week will more clearly explain that. But let's look at some examples of these factions of this category of right-wing leaning anarchists, so-called, and some of their ideologies. So examples include, and you know what, I want to revisit this as well to break down a little bit more. I might step back a slide to revisit the actual factions. As a matter of fact, before we continue with that, let me do this. So I didn't really explain the factions, which I want to break down a little bit more than I did in the original presentation. So you have in left-wing anarchism, anarcho-communism, okay? Anarcho-communism, again, advocates for the ideology of Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, all beginning with perhaps socialist-leaning viewpoints that we should have no private property, we should have collective ownership, which is, again, an oxymoron, and we should eventually move that toward state-run division of those goods and services and labor, and they call this each according to their ability to, each according to their means. And essentially they think that the government is going to, through the Communist Party, would beneficently and wisely mete out the distribution of labor, goods, and services to the whole population so that everybody is doing jobs that they are qualified for and have the ability to do, and everybody would then have their labor basically contribute to the good of the whole society through the confiscation of that labor through the party, meaning that you don't really own anything. You simply work, and you're a worker that doesn't have individual rights because all of your work and the product of your labor goes to the state for the meting out for the good of society. Again, it's all the good of society. The individual is totally looked at as a means to an end. And individual rights aren't respected in this system because you're only alive for the greater good. Instead of having rational self-interest, because you understand natural law and you don't exist in a purely selfish state like a Satanist, and you would have both the good of the rights of the individual and the good of all society existing in a state of balance, which is how natural law really functions. That's the state of equilibrium. again, mathematically expressed by the mathematician John Nash, who laid out natural law in game theory aspects, or at least what was the foundational equations of some game theory, which was basically stating that if everybody is purely selfish, no one wins and society crumbles. And if everybody only has the good of the whole as their intent, society also crumbles because the rights of the individual aren't respected. Nash was on to something gigantic. He was formulating natural law in mathematical construct. He understood it from that level because that's how his brain worked. A bit of a savant in that regard. So what these people who are left-wing leaning anarchists in anarcho-communism are people who believe the society is all that matters. Even though it's comprised of the individual and the individual's rights should be respected, they don't believe that. They believe that the individual only exists to serve the needs of the whole. And that's like a Borg collective mind. Okay? Communism is like the Borg in real life. That's how it really works. The Borg represented that idea of collectivism in Star Trek The Next Generation. They had no respect for the individual. They had no respect for other societies. They had no respect for anybody else's way of doing things. It's our way or the highway. We're going to absorb you. We're going to assimilate you. The individual doesn't matter. Freedom doesn't matter. Self-determination doesn't matter. All that matters is the good of the collective. That's what communism is. Anarcho-syndicalism is a little bit different than that. It's a little less vile and evil than pure communism and totalitarianism on the left wing. But it is localized forms of that level of control, where a smaller society would exist locally, and they would put their product of their labor into small collectivized groups operating in a local capacity, hence the syndicate. That's why it's called syndicalism, because that's what the syndicate would represent, is this small, more decentralized aspect of a local form of socialism / communism. So they see it as not doing it through one centralized state. Communism is essentially centralized international socialism, meaning all nation states have to obey the dictates of the centralized authority of the party. It would be like INGSOC in 1984. Some people would see them as socialists. They were really more communist leaning. Or some people even see them as fascist. Like I said, it all blends together when you reach totalitarian regimes, because they all have the same methods of mass murder, of work camps, concentration camps, killing of the other. Anybody that doesn't agree with their worldview has to be exterminated. And it's a cult. And it's a religious cult. It doesn't just have political beliefs. It has occult religious beliefs. If you really dig through the outer casing of its belief systems and get to the central core. So that's anarcho-syndicalism. It's more of what you would call local decentralized socialist communities. And that's may not be quite as vicious of a form of fake anarchism. It is still one that doesn't lead to anywhere truly moral or good. Black bloc anarchists can be people who are political activists in the left wing to institute either socialism, syndicalism, or communism, but believe that forms of organization that then can sometimes border on violence and or terrorism are acceptable. And these are the people you often see smashing windows and properties at protests, who act as agent provocateurs, and who ultimately are communists and socialists in disguise, the Black Bloc. You could read some of their literature, and it's really all about divisiveness. It's about threats and intimidation is a big part of their political ideology. Dressing the same uniform, wearing all black, looking like a cult for other people to witness and see. Looking like a cult that wants to strong-arm people and damage property if they don't capitulate to their political ideas and their ideologies. And, that's not going to make anybody see anarchism favorably. They're not anarchists. They're political leftists who are acting like children trying to get their way by breaking shit. And once again, it's just a form of naivete. It's a form of being a baby. They're just dumb. All of these people are just dumb. And that goes for all the other forms of fake anarchism. They're just people who have not researched enough, who have not taken enough information into their mind to transform their worldview. Information is the great transformer. Truth is the great transformer of the human worldview. If you're still in this sick, twisted fucking worldview, you haven't healed your trauma. You haven't done that by taking in enough truth about the self and the world. And that makes you a naive baby. And I can say that to other people because I'm not that naive baby, and I have gone through that process, and I have healed my trauma and my worldview, and I do understand what's going on inside me and around me. Definitively, objectively, truthfully. And they do not. So I can say that to them, whereas they cannot say that to me, and I will not accept anybody saying that to me because I'm in the right and they're in the wrong. That's the difference. See, they'll be the insistent ones that say that they're right, but there is a factual, determinable reality about what is right and what is not true. And they're in the wrong, and I'm not. See, that has to continuously be expressed. There is such a thing as being in the right, as having the information correct, as understanding what is real and what is fantasy. And I am in that state, objectively and factually. They are not. They only believe. They only have a belief about being in that state, but it isn't true. It's false. That's what makes their belief system a religion. It's a false belief that leads to nothing but harm and destruction. That's what I consider a religion. That's why there is no religion higher than truth, as stated in the occult philosophical tradition of theosophy. You can look at an ideology that is not a religion, determine factually whether it is true or not, and it can help lead you to truth. All of these ideologies, Marxism, socialism, communism, abolition of private property, abolition of wage labor, or if it's in mutual agreement, collective ownership, all of these things, they're religions. See, that's why we're going to talk about, probably next week, all of these ideologies are religions, including the right-wing forms of anarchism, so-called anarchism in quotes. So let's look at these examples and their beliefs. Sorry, I left out Antifa. How could I leave out my friends? How could I leave out people who claim to be anti-fascist yet are fascists? Again, same intimidation tactics and techniques. They really want to move things towards socialism and communism. They're not anarchists at all. They're Marxists, okay? And Leninists and Trotskyites and Stalinists, etc., or Maoists, all the great people who led to such great accomplishments in our world by starving out people who were their political opponents because they're just savage fucking murderers. And that's all communism ever really leads to. It doesn't lead to anything good. Neither does crony capitalism, for that matter. Only consciousness under natural law leading to true anarchy will ever lead to anything good. If you believe anything other than that, you're wrong. You're simply wrong. You're attached to a religion and you're fucking dumb. Because you had enough time to learn what the truth was and you failed to do it. You failed to do it because you don't have the mental acumen. You don't have the mental acuity. It's sad, but you were fucked up at birth. You were fucked up by chemicals that were produced for you in the womb through what your mother ate that fucked your brain up. You're fucked up with drugs and other so-called medicines when you were young. You were fucked up by vaccines. You were fucked up with shit food. You know, there's a lot of reasons for why your brain's this fucked up, but it's not really an excuse because it can all be healed. You just have to stop thinking that you're right. You have to admit that you're fucked up. Then you can heal yourself. So Antifa is really no different than these former groups. There's a blend of all of them in there. It's kind of the new banner child for all the other left-wing forms of anarchism, so-called, not the real thing. And they claim to be anti-fascism because they believe in this traditional political spectrum where they're all the way on the left and then the Nazi faction, the fascists, are all the way on the right. And they don't even understand they're cut from the same fucking cloth. They're the exact same types of people. They're just as fucking brainwashed into a religion. They're just as brainwashed into violence. They don't know natural law. They don't know good from right from wrong. They don't know good from bad. They don't know human history. They're just dumb fucking people. You know? And they have a nice name. Who wouldn't want to be anti-fascist, right? Who wouldn't want to be anti-communist, right? You can name yourself anti-fascist all you want. If your fucking behavior is fascist, you're a fascist. We got to stop looking at things according to what they're called. We have to start looking at things based on the action that the people inside these factions do. You'll know them by their deeds, period. So, you know, this is the new strong arm faction of the political left, and it has largely absorbed a lot of the other fake anarchists like anarcho-communists, anarcho-syndicalists, and black bloc anarchists. This is the new rallying banner, is Antifa. So I just want to explain a little bit more for people who don't know the specifics of some of these different factions going forward. All right, the right-wing anarchists, finally getting to the examples of them and their actual religious beliefs, which are a little bit less stringent religions, and there's some good things within them that should be accepted as being true, but then they go off the rails with some things. So, examples are anarcho-capitalism, again, putting anarcho in quotes because it's not true, full anarchism, agorism, and voluntarism, which you could say aren't hyphenated forms of anarchism. They're different ideologies and beliefs in their own right, which can have a lot of really, really true and good things within them. It's just when they don't go all the way, it becomes the problem. The ideologies include, and again, an ideology can be true or false, so using it here is appropriate. If it's true, it really is sort of a philosophy because it leads to wisdom and it leads to correct human interaction. So I would agree with a lot of these. Free market economics, free market interaction would be more of an accurate way to say it. No one is coerced into participating. Participation in any given market form is voluntary, is mutually consensual. That's what voluntarism is. Voluntary interaction, the next ideology here. I believe in this myself. I know this is true. I know this is true philosophy. I know this is what should be practiced. I don't even think it is true. I definitively know that that's correct. All forms of interaction in our society should be voluntary because only voluntary interaction is moral behavior. Okay? Once you enter the realm of coercion, once you enter the realm of duress, or once you enter the realm of direct physical violence, you've left moral interaction and you've entered immoral interaction with other beings, which I don't believe should ever be done. That's always morally wrong. And freedom of association. These are principles of these different sects of right-wing leaning so-called anarchism. So you see the V for voluntarism, the AG is agorism, and the one below is, I believe, anarcho-capitalism, or it's another form of voluntarism. But anyway, I agree with the basic principles of these different sects in the right-wing leaning. I'm going to tell you where I think that they go off course, but unfortunately I can't do that today because that's all the time that we currently have for this edition of What on Earth is Happening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We'll continue with this presentation next week We'll continue breaking down all the different forms of fake anarchism and then getting into their mentality and their ideologies and the things that make them religions. Come back and check that out next week for part 2. Remember, you've been watching What on Earth is Happening, and government is slavery. We'll see you right here next week.